Okay, Rabotai, we are continuing on Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim. Siman Ayin Vav is what we started discussing the halachot of tzoah, and we mentioned that this happens to actually be very practical when you have babies, children, grandchildren at home. Sometimes also, unfortunately, elderly parents and grandparents could also end in a source of question for this. And we spoke about the fact that erva ba'ashashid is asur. If you could see through an erva over the window is a problem, but tzoah ba'ashashid is not a problem. If you have excrement exposed through a window, but you don't smell anything, it's covered with the window, so to speak, the cover does it. And you can stand right next to it and say your Shema, no problems. Now, what does that mean in terms of a baby running around with a dirty diaper? Well, the tzoah is covered, quote unquote. Is that considered a cover when there's a diaper, which is, separating you from the tzoah? That's one question. Second question is, imagine if you have a dirty diaper that you changed, and now you have the dirty diaper in a, the diaper, diaper pail, or you have it in a kli of some sort, but there could be some smell coming from the diaper pail or from the garbage can or from anything that you turned over the diaper. What is the halacha with that? So the Mishna Berurah, as we will see, is going to be a little bit more lenient than the Ben Ish Chai and the Kaf HaChaim. Still, we are on Seif Aleph of Siman Ayin Vav. The Chafetz Chaim in Seif Katan Gimel says, "Ve'magia lo reach ra asur." If you have bad smell emanating from the tzoah and you could smell it, is of course asur. But here is the leniency. By the way, when you have reach ra asur, can I have one of these air freshener sprays? And I say, well, I'm stuck here. I'm gonna say Shema. So here we go. Instead of holding my nose, for now I'm gonna do a few sprays over here. For the next 10 minutes, it's not gonna smell bad. And I say my Shema. Can I do that? No. So, or you put besamim around, right? You put a few besamim and perfumes around that, or you could create a bad smell that's not a negative smell, which is not a bad smell, right? Take a parchment or something and burn it, and you have now the smoke and the smell of the burning thing, which is going to kind of like override and drown the bad smell of tzoah. Is that considered good or not? So, say that again. Well, if the tzoah is there, it's reach ra sheyesh lo mekor, it becomes a source. Of course, it's going to come back. But for now, for next 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour, you're not going to have any problem, right? So, this Nechemed, Rabbi Chaim Chizkiyahu Medini, he writes that it's not a problem. Why? Because remember that tzoah is not exposed; it's covered. So the only problem is that you can smell it. So if you get rid of the smell, I don't really mind how you get rid of the smell. For the meanwhile, there's no smell. You don't smell anything bad, and you don't see tzoah. You're not exposed to it. It's covered. You're good to go. You're fine. That's what the Nechemed mentions. But if the tzoah would be exposed, that's already a different story. Now, the Chafetz Chaim says, "Ve'afilu leman de'amar besiman ayin tet de'afsaka mo'elet dereach ra davka mechitza." Says the Mishna Berurah, there is an opinion in Siman Ayin Tet that if you have a hefsek between you and the tzoah, then the smell doesn't really matter much. Says the Chafetz Chaim, that's when you have a mechitza, and that's when you have a halachic partition. Here is not a halachic partition. You have just a cover on top of it. There's a garbage can. There is a diaper pail. That's not considered a halachic partition. So therefore, so long as you smell it, is a problem. Umikol makom, here is the leniency of Mishna Berurah. You ready? Says the Mishna Berurah, Umikol makom, en tzarich bazeh 400 mimakom shkala reach. You don't need to have a distance from where the reach ends. In other words, you go away from the source of the bad smell, the diaper pail or whatnot, or the baby that's smelling, and so long as he or she does not follow you, right? You go, and so as soon as the smell stops, you could say Shema. You don't need to say, well, the smell stopped here. Now I have to go 4 amot, 6 feet away from the place that the smell stopped. If you don't smell it, it's fine. And this is what the Pri Megadim says. This is what Kaf HaChaim disagrees with. Kaf HaChaim says, no. If you have a diaper pail and you could smell the diaper pail, that means the area you're in, well, the smell that you have is from a tzoah, it's from excrement. So that in halacha is called reach ra sheyesh lo mekor, a bad smell that has a source. And says the Kaf HaChaim, you ought to deal with reach ra sheyesh lo mekor as the extension of the tzoah itself, of the excrement itself. Hence, it is not enough that it is covered, and it's not enough that you left the place that the smell reaches. You have to distance yourself 4 amot, 6 feet minimum, from the area that smell stopped. Because the entire area that's the smell is there, imagine a dome, that is considered the domain of the tzoah. You have to distance yourself from the domain of the tzoah 4 amot. And that's what the Kaf HaChaim paskins, and this is what the the Ben Ish Chai also seems to side with. So fine. Now says the Mishna Berurah, אבל בסימן עין תל במשפט זהב נשאר בסריך עיון. Later on, the Pri Megadim has a sarich iyun. V'ayin b'siman ayin tet be'be'ur halacha. So the Mishna Berurah leaves it a little bit, even though that he brings the leniency of Pri Megadim. He says at the end that the Pri Megadim himself, in Mishpat Zahav, in Siman ayin tet, and his comments on the Taz, he has a little doubt there. Now, over there, the Biur Halacha, if you take a look at the Chafetz Chaim Biur Halacha, he discusses that there are those who say that the Reach Ra, a bad smell that comes from excrement that's covered, is considered Reach Ra sheyesh lo ikar, a bad smell that has source. Sometimes you have a bad smell that doesn't have a source. What's the example for it? Excuse the language, but someone that lets, a bad smell, right? Hafacha. So that is a reach ra she'en lo ikar. There's nothing exposed that we consider reach ra she'esh lo ikar. So therefore, technically speaking, is much more lenient as we're going to study the halachot of what happens if you're in a bit midrash or in the middle of tefillah, and then to no fault of you, somebody else creates a reach ra. You have to stop davening? You have to say stop mid bracha, or can you continue davening? Right? We're going to discuss the difference between a person that caused it, a person that was just subject to it, and so on. But that's considered reach ra she'en lo ikar. Here, there are those who say this is considered reach ra she'esh lo ikar. If you have a baby with a dairy diaper, even though that tzoah is covered, it's a reach ra which is, it's emanating from a source. Even though that the source is covered, we don't imagine the halakha that the source is gone. The source is still there. You can smell it. So that's one way. And therefore, it's not enough. Whenever you have a reach ra she'esh lo, it's not enough to just go as far as the smell stops. You have to distance yourself from where the smell stops 4 amot. So that's one way of looking at it, and that's the Ben Ish Chai's psak, as we mentioned before, and the Chacham Ben Zion Abba Shaul in Or LeZion also paskins like that. The Ben Ish Chai is in Parashat Mishpatim in Ot Dalit, and the Or LeZion is in Cherek Bed in Perek Vav that discusses this halachot, and therefore by Etzoah, this is every young family and some of the older families with elderly parents, they have these questions. Therefore, the hora'ah would be that a tzo'ah of a tino, when you have a dirty diaper of a little kid, even though that it is covered with the diaper, but the smell is emanating out, that is considered a tzo'ah mechuseh, is a covered tzo'ah, with a reach ra sheyesh lo mekor, and therefore it is not sufficient to just merely go away from where the diaper is until you can't smell, but you have to, when you can no longer smell, another 4 amot after that. You have to go away, right? That becomes literally a daily thing. You're saying kiddush, right? So yom hashishi vaychulu hashamayim va'aretz, and then you start smelling a re'ach nihoach l'Hashem. Like your 2-year-old is holding on to you, and there is a big diaper there, and so you have to stop. And you say, okay, take the kid away. But again, even if you know, so you're in the 4 amot of where the re'ach stops, you still are in trouble. So you have to take it away. Now, if a person could be mahmir, it should be mahmir, because again, that's the psak of the Kaf HaChaim. Even though that Kaf HaChaim says, well, there's machloket, and then you should be mahmir if it's possible, because the Or LeZion is mahmir, Ben Ish Chai is mahmir, is best to be more mindful of this. And with this, again, there's more to talk about this subject. We do what we do, and we have to go on. Seif Bet, we'll do one more seif over here. So abeguma. If you have a so'ah inside a ditch, you can put your shoes on it or any cover on it and read, because now it's considered it's covered, even though that you're not touching it. Well, I shouldn't say it like that, because that makes it worse. Even though that it's not a kisui over, it's not a cover over the tzo'ah, just blocking the ditch, the hole in the ground that the tzo'ah is in, would be considered kisui, and you could read, so long as it is not a bad smell emanating from it. Now, and that's given that your shoe is not touching the tzoah. So I said, I corrected myself, because if your sandal, if your shoe is touching the tzoah, then you're in touch with the tzoah, and that becomes a different level of a problem. So, and this is not, of course, only shoe. You could put anything on it. You could put any cover on top of it that's considered a kisui, and that would be sufficient. On the other hand, says the Mishna Berurah, that your shoe cannot be touching it. You put the that the shoe cannot be touching it. Says the Mishna Berurah, it's normal. Even if it's completely covered, just on the bottom of this, the bottom of the shoe is touching it, that still would be a problem. Why? Is the sandal, you're wearing the shoe. It's not that you put a shoe that you're not wearing on top of it. You're wearing the shoe is considered your malbush, your clothing. And your clothing is attached to this part of you. And therefore, it is considered that you're touching a so'ah and you cannot be reading it, even though that you don't see it, even though that's covered, even though there is no smell, still would be a problem. What's the etzah? Take your shoe off, put it on. Then it's no longer your malbush. Then you could say Shema. Nogea. Ayin be'olat tamid. So let's take a look at the olat tamid. and Pri Megadim shemesadim lomar deim achar shkara kriyat shema ubirchotea matzah soa dvuka b'sandalo chozer vekore kriyat shema belo birchotea. Says a question of what happens b'di'evet if you said Shema and then you find out that there was soa smeared on your shoe, which would mean that you stepped on something that's walking in the street and you had some soa on your shoe when you said Shema. You have to go back and say Shema again. Now, we have to also discuss, how about the soa of a dog? That happens, unfortunately, all the time. It was a while back, very late at night, I was very tired and exhausted. I came home, and after 2 minutes, I realized that there are brown stuff on all over the kitchen floor, and then I followed the trail. So I was looking in the hallway, and then I realized after 30 seconds that it's actually my shoes, and they have something on the bottom. I'd stepped on a fresh something of a dog, and it's actually extremely sticky and very, very difficult to get off. You have to really sanitize it. Well, it's a whole process. It's the last thing you want to do when you're collapsing after a day of hard work, and it's the wee hours of the night. But nevertheless, that's just for hygiene. Is it considered really a soa that you can't say Shema in front of it? When you have a soa of an animal, is something that we're going to discuss as well. But nevertheless, in the b'di'evet case, you have a whole machloket over here in Mishna Berurah. Now, the Kaf Chaim adds that this that you could cover the soa with anything, any cover, that even if you have a kli that's miyuchad for soa, right? Like a diaper pail. A diaper pail is what it is. It's a diaper pail. It's miyuchad for diapers. It's considered a kli made for tzoah. And in that case, if it's made from matechet, says the Kaf Chaim, if it's made from metal, it's considered still a kisui. So if you have something that does not necessarily, it's not kli cheres, doesn't absorb the tzoah and the smell inside of it, right? It's something that's glass or it's metal or is plastic in a way that's inside of it that it does not absorb any of the thing to itself, and here it's covered as well, then it's considered a kisui, is considered a cover as well. Whereas if you would have a earthware, which used to be what they had graf shilra in past, the vessel itself, the graph itself, it absorbs the tzoah and the urine and the smell. It becomes the halacha of the vessel, the pail, whatever it is that they used to the potty, basically. The potty itself becomes the halacha of tzoah. It's like a piece of tzoah. And therefore, it's not considered cover, as we're going to see. But nowadays, again, the plastic that doesn't absorb anything, glass, all those things, that would be considered a cover. So if you don't have any other problems, the smell and so on and so forth, it will be good to go. It's a good question. We got to get to someone that cannot smell, right? In other words, is your mahane kadosh? So right now, is your place good? If another person would be there, it would be not good. But now you can't smell it, and it's covered, right? It's covered. You cannot smell anything, right? Whether or not that's considered a scenario that you can say Shema because there's smell, or you could say Shema because, well, I don't smell it. For me, it's all good, right? That's what you're asking. So we got to get to that. So says the Mishna Berurah. Well, rather, when we said the guf is not considered kisui, if the guf of a person is actually covering on a soam, the Kaf Chaim says that it is considered kisui, and you could say Shema in front of it, if again in certain circumstances, which we're going to get into as we develop the Siman, says the Mishna Berurah. Let's just finish this Seif in Seif Katan Tet. Dehave kigraf ve'im achalon patuach. This is wait a second. I skipped the Seif Katan over here. We actually finished the Seif Katan, the Seif Bet, which is Seif Katan Vav. There's just one little addition over here. The Kaf HaChaim says in the last piece that you're touching, that your shoe is touching the tzoah. The Kaf HaChaim says that when your shoe is touching the tzoah, is asur to say Kriyat Shema, even if it's not attached to your shoe, it's just touching it, still will be asur. And a hole or a kli, a vessel that has meraglayim in it, as urine, not tzoah, and you put your shoe on it, completely covering the whole thing, then the Kaf HaChaim says is mutar, even if the sandal, even if the shoe is touching the meraglayim, still will be considered, as long as it's covered, is not the same halacha as tzoah. So the touching that prevents a person from being able to say Kriyat Shema is only a specific din by tzoah, by excrement, not by urine, not by meraglayim. And Bezat Hashem will continue on Seif Gimel in the days to come.